In the intricate world of Korean affairs, tailored intelligence makes all the difference. Korea Risk Group's consulting services offer specialized, actionable intelligence designed to guide your Korea-related decisions. We provide bespoke consulting services that cater to your unique challenges and goals. From policy analysis to market entry strategies, we bring clarity to complexity. Transform uncertainty into opportunity and visit koreapro.com solutions today. Hello listeners and welcome to the NK News Podcast. My name is Jacko Zwetsloot and I'm the host of the NK News Podcast, and today we're recording this interview via StreamYard. And joining me via StreamYard is Mr. Jingwu Fang, who is an independent documentary filmmaker who runs a show on YouTube called Jingwu Show. He's based in China but travels the world to make his films, which are very interesting. He recently made a two-part video called How Did a Third Korea Form? In brackets in China, which is 2 hours and 20 minutes in total. I recommend all of you go and have a look at it. These videos together about Korea have had almost 400,000 views, and we'll share links to both of those videos in the show notes. Jingwu, welcome on the show.
Thank you, Jacob, for having me. Thank you for the introduction. Very glad to be here.
So this idea of a third Korea, for our listeners who may not have seen your video yet, what is it and where is it?
So this third Korea is a swath of land just north of North Korea. It is about 30% of North Korea's land area and about 43% about South Korea's land area. So it's actually quite large, but most of people have never heard about this place.
Right. So North and South Korea together are the first and second Korea in whatever order. And so you're talking about this piece of China, Northeast China,
North is China.
and there are lots of ethnic Korean people living there, aren't there?
Yes, there are close to 1 million Korean Chinese live in that piece of land called Yanbian. Actually, it's called Yanbian Korean Autonomous Prefecture. So there's actually Korean in the name of that land. So
Right.
it's a legit Korean region. Yeah.
Right. And what drew you to this story?
Yeah. So I think I first learned about the existence of the Korean Chinese when I was 9 or 10 years old. So there was a kid in my class who was Korean Chinese, and I didn't really know or care about their lives and their struggles back then. Because I was a kid too,
Yeah.
I knew nothing. But then I think 10 years later, when I was in college, I watched this South Korean gangster movie called The Yellow Sea. I think it's
Mm.
called Hwanghae
Okay.
in Korean. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that movie, in my opinion, is one of the best movies in the history of cinema.
Wow. Okay.
And
I haven't seen it. I have to confess, I have to watch it now.
please do. And it is about a struggle of a very desperate Korean Chinese man from Yanbian. The economic difficulties, this job opportunity, illegal job opportunity waiting for him in South Korea that can solve all his problem. And I was absolutely fascinated by the storytelling, the plot, and of course, the actors were all really, really good. So a couple years later, right after I finished watching that film, I told myself I have to check this place out. So a couple of years later, I made my first trip to Yanbian. I think that was in
Uh-huh.
2019. And then 2 years later, in 2021, during the COVID, I went there again for the second time. And
Wow. That must have been difficult during COVID.
it certainly was. It certainly was. Have to do the COVID testing every 3 days, I think. And
Wow.
there was one region. It's called the Hunchun because it
Oh,
was
yeah.
so close to the North Korean border and the Russian border. But they had special regulations. I think you have to take multiple tests a day to
Wow.
to walk around in that region. Well, that was the COVID times. Yeah, terrible times.
Gee.
Yeah.
Now, you speak a little bit of Korean, don't you?
I speak very little Korean. Yes, I learned it a little bit. I think back in 2018, 2019. Yeah.
Okay, and so you've been there to Yanbian, and how was it going around and speaking a bit of Korean and meeting ethnic Korean Chinese citizens?
It's interesting because the Korean I learned some South Korean, the Korean from South Korea. People in South Korea speak,
Sure.
but the people in Yanbian they had, well, back then, well, I think they still do. They speak a very unique Korean Chinese dialect. It is
Uh-huh.
closer to North Korean
Mm.
to from how I understand it. Yeah. In 2024, I went there a third time. So and that time I managed to film a lot of really important footage. So it took me many years to produce this documentary. Yeah.
Wow, you really have been working on it for quite a while. Now, have you been to North Korea itself?
No, I haven't because I just learned about this Korean Chinese thing back in 2019. I really didn't have the opportunity to make such a trip to North Korea.
Yeah. Do you want to go now that you've finished your film series on the three Koreas? Do you still want to visit there?
You mean Yanbian or North Korea?
To North Korea,
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's one of I love to see Pick Tucson from the North Korean side because
right? Because
I
in your first film, you went on the Chinese side to Paektusan.
exactly.
Yeah. Do you know if Chinese tourism to North Korea has restarted? Have you seen it advertised, for example?
No, it haven't. As of 2024, at least, it haven't.
Okay, wow. Now, what about South Korea? Have you been to South Korea?
When I was a kid, I had been there once, and I think in 2016 I transferred once in South Korea, but I didn't exit the airport. So
Mm,
that was many years ago. Yeah, I remember. I think I was in Busan, I think,
yeah.
for a couple of days, and that was when I was a like kid. Yeah, so
So, in the process of making this two-part film, the most time that you've spent surrounded by Korean-speaking people was in Yanbian.
yes, Yanbian.
Yeah. In this third Korea. Now, in this film, you tell the story of Korean emigration to northeast China in the mid to late 19th century, and also the tragedy of colonization by Japan and the division of Korea after World War II, which led to the Korean War. And you try to give a neutral, balanced account. But in the Korean story, that's so difficult. How did you do that? How did you try to stay neutral?
Well, that's a very good question. Because I think because I have a very deep love for the Korean culture. I have a lot of respect for the South Koreans and the North Korean struggle and the Korean Chinese communities. And I had so many friends, so many Korean friends in the United States, in China, and
Mhm.
in Yanbian as well. I don't want. I think because I loved them so much, I don't want to hurt any of them. So that's how I
Mm,
maintain my neutrality in some way, I think. Yeah.
right. Now, China and North Korea, of course, have a very special relationship, state to state and party to party relationship going back to 1950. So, apart from yourself, generally speaking, how do you think Chinese people look at North Korea? How do they see North Korean people?
I think that it depends on the generations. For example,
Mm,
my grandparents' generation, I think they feel for them. They feel for the North Koreans. But like my parents' generation, because that they grew up during the Cultural Revolution, the
yeah,
relations between China and North Korea wasn't so good back then. So
mm,
they don't really like the North Korean government. And our generation, we don't really talk about that at all because
right.
we speak more about the United States, Japan,
Hmm.
South Korea, and Russia. Like North Korea is not really a big topic among us. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of ignored by the young generation. Would that be fair
Yes.
to say? It's
Yes.
probably not so different from the young people in South Korea, I guess, who also don't spend a lot of time talking or thinking about North Korea.
Right.
Now, how do Han Chinese people see the autonomous Korean prefecture of Yanbian and the ethnic Korean Chinese people who live there?
So yeah, that because majority of the Han Chinese in Northeast China, they are also descendants of the Han immigrations to Northeast China. And
Mm.
they had in the earlier stage, they had this competition with the Korean immigrants. The Han Chinese
Ah.
immigration competed with the Korean immigrants. So the relation wasn't so good in the early stage, especially under the Japanese rule. Under the Japanese rule, the government of Japan, they really successfully turned the Chinese against the Korean and the Koreans against Chinese. So there was a lot of race war, I would say, happened in
Mm.
Yanbian. Yeah, and after
During the
the
Japanese colonization.
yes, during the Japanese
Yeah.
colonization, and yeah, and after the war, after the Korean War, a lot
Hmm.
of North Koreans and South Korean. Well, back then it was just one Korea. Korea. A lot of Koreans fled the war and entered
Mm.
Yanbian, the state. Ever since, they never returned. So,
Yeah.
and gradually, after the new China was established, after Yanbian was established, after this prefecture was formally established, there was a lot of Han Chinese people actually left that region,
Mm.
and it was purely Korean immigrants, the descendants of the Korean immigrants, and they lived there. So
Ah.
it was kind of the memory was cut off.
Mm.
They no longer share the same memory of under the Japanese rule, of under the Manchu Qing rule. No longer the Korean Chinese rule Yanbian. That's all. But during the Cultural
Yeah.
Revolution, it was all disrupted. But after
Mm.
the Cultural Revolution, it returned to the previous state. So that's the thing. Yeah, and after China and the South Korea established the diplomatic relations in the 1990s, a lot of Korean Chinese left China, left
Mm.
Yanbian. They moved to South Korea for work. They moved to Shandong Peninsula for work. And then a lot of Han Chinese re-entered the region because, Deng Xiaoping, the former leader of China, he opened Yanbian up to South Korea, North Korea, and the Soviet Union. Well, the Soviet Union already dissolved at that time, and Russia. So
Hmm.
a lot of Han Chinese also came and did a lot of business there. But then the economy in North China, didn't take off at all, and they
Okay.
left again. So nowadays it is very abandoned, I would say. Yanbian, you can see empty houses everywhere. Nobody lives there anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You showed that in I think the first part of your film there, and I've seen some news articles where there are children left behind in Yanbian being raised by their grandparents while their parents are in South Korea trying to make money.
Yes.
Now, do you know anything about the Hwagyo, the ethnic Han Chinese who live in North Korea not as citizens but as residents? Want the full story? Become an NK News member to continue listening to the complete episode, packed with insights, analysis, and everything you love about the NK News podcast. Head to nknews.org/join for more information about how you can access the full conversation along with the latest news on North Korea.